This is a match. This is a matchbox. When you go into the sign of Aries, this is what you want right away, ignition. But when you get Saturn in the sign of Aries, it's like having a match like this, and you're just like, where's my fire? Where's my fire? This is what it's been like since May 24th of 2025 when Saturn went into Aries. False starts, false ignition, feeling stalled, stuck. So we need to go back and we need to figure things out. Hence, that brings us to our video today, which is the ingress of Saturn back into the sign of Pisces for the last time for another 28 years. On September 1st of 2025, it's going to stay there until February 14th of 2026 on Valentine's Day. The most perfect planet for Valentine's Day. But beyond all jokes, that's a discussion today, and this is actually a very significant regress of Saturn because it's going to correspond to the eclipse season. 6 days later, we have a total lunar eclipse in the sign of Pisces. So there's a lot happening. We're going to unpack that in this video. As I just mentioned, Saturn moved into Aries in May, and this was Saturn going into its sign of debilitation. So Saturn was stripped off its dignity, and it was very much unable to carry its usual authority in terms of what Saturn is and what Saturn does. Restrictions, limitations, negation, boundaries. So the Saturn within us was very much out of sort and misplaced. And that's because Saturn's slowness, sense of restraint, and detachment is at odds with the fiery, passionate, igniting ways of Aries. So some of the most prominent feelings in us since May 24th has been feelings of strain, false starts, and for some of us, even the collapse of order. We can't place ourselves. We don't know how to act, where to begin, what it is that we need to do. The boundaries that used to hold our lives together is becoming undone since Saturn's ingress into Aries. So on Monday, Saturn regresses back into the 29-degree mark of Pisces, back into a mutable sign, a watery sign, a feely sign. And what we're going to find out is that a lot of our old ways, the way that we need to act and initiate, need to dissolve. They need to come to their conclusion, so some new applications can emerge. So Saturn's movement into Pisces, it's like dissolving back into the vast ocean where the drops are undifferentiated from each other. It's a space of ambiguity and fluidity. So in some ways, Saturn's debilitated in Aries, not good. But Pisces is not the most comfortable sign for Saturn too, because Saturn represents reality. It's about the laws of cause and effect. So Saturn's actually what operationalizes the way that we become functional in a tangible world of cause and effect. And in Pisces, that solid aspect of the world is non-existent. So a lot of the Saturnine ways that we have that we want to enforce how things ought to be, the boundaries that we set, they actually need to get dissolved. And Pisces will help us do this. And we have to remember Pisces is very much concerned with potentiality of things rather than the actuality of things. And Saturn is about the actuality. So we need to negotiate with this concept. And this regress is very much about this. And a primary purpose or the outcome of this regress back into Pisces, just pay attention to May 24th till now. It's trying very much to undo those things, the way that we try to set things into motion. That's why I was saying earlier, there was a lot of false starts. We couldn't ignite. And because Saturn was there, we had such a hard grip on it. Like, I need to make this work. But Saturn moving back into Pisces is going to diffuse this grip now. So we can translate this as loosening restrictions, especially the restrictions, maybe scarcity that we had to experience in the past 3 months. But like everything that's been going on with the transits, this one is not a straightforward one. It's not like you just bought a shirt, you're like, oh my God, it doesn't fit. You just go and exchange it or return it. And I say it's not straightforward, not only because there's some dissonance between Saturn and the sign of Pisces, but also because Saturn's at that 29-degree mark when it re-enters Pisces, which is that gandanta points, the critical degree, the karmic knot that I've been talking about in a lot of videos happening with a lot of planets. Because look at Pluto, it's in that critical degree. We have Uranus is in that critical degree. Not so bad because they're not moving from water to fire, but we just had Venus move from Cancer into the sign of Leo. So we're having a lot of these conundrums right now of how do I act? How do I place myself? What is my life about? And the most difficult one to negotiate is when a sign is connected to each other via the element of fire and water. And Aries is fire, Pisces is water. So Saturn's moving from fire back into water. So we have to go from that concept of ignition to dissolving and dissolution now, which is exhausting. And to translate that into human experience, it's very exhausting. A lot of us are actually going into that state of dissolution because we're exhausted from constantly trying to ignite and start something. And Saturn's going to go through this critical degree in its entire transit from Pisces to Aries 3 times. So this is 2 of the 3rd, because when Saturn stations direct, it has to come back to this point again. And every time we get back to this 1 degree of Aries, it's like reopening a karmic conundrum, karmic entanglements. But this one is super distinct because, again, it's connecting itself to the eclipse that comes 6 days later. So this gandanta point, this critical degree, is very much about unraveling things, especially what got set into motion on May of 2025. And in fact, if you look back, you'll see that there's been a sense of continuity with this karmic knot. Since March 7th of 2023, that's when Saturn made its way into the sign of Pisces. From that March 7th of 2023, the Saturn ingress was about dissolution of some of our old pattern. So we're still in that process. We're trying to get some sort of a closure so that we can move forward. And this last ingress is not about fixing things anymore. It's really about letting go, letting it dissolve, let it come to its conclusion for us to have a closure. So think back to not just May of 2025, but also to March of 2023. What were you trying to build? Because we're talking about that narrative right now. What are the unfinished business that you feel that you still have from this time period? These are the themes that are resurfacing right now to work themselves out. That's the knot. That's the karmic conundrum right now. How do we dissolve it once and for all and we move forward, especially when Saturn goes back into the sign of Aries in February? But now let's just connect the Saturn's ingress back into Pisces with the eclipses. So we have the first lunar eclipse of the eclipse season on September 7th of 2025, which will be at 15 degrees of Pisces. So this is not the effect of Saturn in the orb of its degree, but they are sitting in the same sign. So Saturn's very much connected to the eclipses. And especially since Saturn's sitting at that critical degree, it's adding a kind of a gravity to this eclipse. So this eclipse is not just about what the moon's representing here, but Saturn's pressing on our minds. The moon represents our subjectivity, our desires, our needs, everything that's occurring within our mind. And it is time to dissolve that, to let go of certain ways of being within ourselves. And think about what Saturn means. Saturn has a lot to do with coldness, objectivity. So it has to do with detachment. And moon is a very desirous, feely planet. So to bind Saturn to this eclipse, we can make the interpretation that Saturn itself is trying to detach our mind from certain patterns. It's showing us the decay of our old subjectivity and its preferences, or certain needs that we have, desires that we have, that's coming from moon signification. And Saturn also represents reality. So it's pressing on the moon, the mind, wanting it to understand what's real and what's not real anymore, which is essentially a confrontation about endings. Again, to bring certain mental categories, the way that we feel, to an end. But we also have to remember Saturn is slow. So it's not like the eclipses are going to happen, we're going to see this effect. This is going to be ongoing, and we're probably going to see the outcome or the result of this in February when Saturn moves back into Aries and we're compelled again to ignite and to initiate. And not to mention, Saturn has to cover its shadow degrees for the retrograde and come back to this 29th degree. That's when we're going to see what's been dissolved, what conclusion have we come to. And the sign of Pisces having a lot to do with potentiality and not actuality of things. This act of dissolving, the dissolution of the old, is allowing us to understand the potential and the essence of things in our lives. And with this retrograde of Saturn, Saturn's gonna, in terms of the nakshatras, is gonna be moving through the Bahadrapada nakshatras. And Saturn in the Bahadrapada nakshatras in general creates an enormous amount of dissatisfaction. That's the feeling that it brings on. It's like, whatever that I've gathered in this world, whatever that I have, why is it that I can't extract any satisfaction out of it? And that's because The Bahadrapadas want us to understand the essence of things, not the appearance. So we keep trying to make ourselves feel satisfied with the appearance of our lives, what we've accumulated, what we have, what we've been doing. But internally, we just feel unsettled. We can't sit with it and be happy about it. And I made a full-length video on Saturn in Purva Bahadrapada Nakshatra. I'll put the link to the description of this video. It's actually good to watch that video to get a feel of how this Saturn's going to unfold itself in this nakshatra. But the point I'm trying to make here is that we have to be okay for the next few months with this feeling of dissatisfaction, the inconclusive nature of the present time, or feeling we're just in this liminal space, between water and fire. So we have to be able to hold this stance of uncertainty for a while. And not to mention the eclipses bring all kinds of chaos and uncertainty. And it's not like an eclipse happens, an event happens right on the eclipse. It's talking about the duration between this eclipse and the next one. And now all the eclipses are going to be in that Virgo-Pisces axis. So this is an ongoing story. And what we're unclear about is, how do I make potentiality into an actuality? Like, we're looking at ourselves and we're like, you know what? I have a potential to do this. But my actual life is not at all on par with this. I don't have an application for this. I don't know how to be in the world based on how I feel the essence of me is, what it's like. So we're negotiating this tension. And honestly, it's not a good feeling, because you just feel fraudulent in life. Sometimes you feel like an imposter. You don't belong in your life. These are very prominent, common feelings right now. This is a time to actually learn how to undo all the things we were trying to do since 2023, and especially since May of this year. We might have worked very hard towards certain things, but it's time to let them go. Let go of the forms that have emerged since 2023. It's really about understanding what that essence is, what that potential is, and let it reconfigure into something else. And I talk about this in the last video with the transit of Jupiter in Punarvasu, which is about redoing things, recombining and reconfiguring what we already have to make something new in life. And who's the ruler of the sign of Pisces? It's Jupiter, and Jupiter is in the sign of Cancer. And in some ways, this is very difficult because, like I'm saying, we've worked on certain things, but we also have to sit with the fact that no matter how hard we're trying towards certain things, are not working. There's no application for it. And if we don't figure it out, we're going to be stuck in the state for all eternity. So in a sense, this is a blessing to be able to go back, to be able to redo, to let certain things dissolve so that we can move forward when Saturn makes his way back into the sign of Aries. And we really have to know, we really have to use that rationality of Saturn to get through that transit of Saturn through the sign of Aries, because no matter what, it's still debilitated. But we really felt Saturn's debilitation from May to now. And I would say we're going to get the clarity of how it is that we need to proceed next March of 2026. And that's when the sun moves out of that eclipse axis and comes into the sign of Aries and gets exalted while Saturn is there. It's going to be tense. But that's the moments that it's almost like we get summoned to a higher calling, or suddenly we understand how much work is realistically ahead of us and what it is that we need to do to make this potential into an actuality. So right now we're entering that liminal space, which is usually the most painful state of being. And I've said this in other videos. When we know what we're grappling with, no matter how hard it is, we can pace ourselves, we can think, we can plan. So we don't feel like we're suffering, we're problem solving. But this liminal space can bring that feeling of suffocation, drowning, being confused, which is not pleasant. So I want to bring your attention back to Jupiter again for a second, because when Saturn was in Pisces last time, Jupiter was in the sign of Gemini, which is in its fall. That's not where Jupiter likes to be. And they were sitting in a square aspect to each other. But this time, Jupiter has moved into the sign of Cancer where it's exalted. So it's making a trine to Saturn by sign. And at the same time, it is in its exalted form, it is the ruler of Pisces. And it's important to remember that Jupiter is casting its special aspect or its trine on Rahu almost to the degree when this eclipse comes up, as well as the ingress of Saturn into the sign of Pisces. And it's making a sextile to Ketu in the sign of Virgo. And this is a blessing because while Saturn and all the boundaries we actually do need in our lives, the way that it's been given us an application to be able to act to obey the laws of cause and effect while it's getting dissolved in Pisces. Jupiter is aligning or realigning our internal self to reconfigure things, to have a wider scope, to have a better understanding. In a lot of ways, Jupiter is helping Saturn to figure out how to make this potential into an actuality, what the essence of things are. Jupiter's bringing his knowledge and wisdom to this right now. Like Jupiter's helping us understand what we've accumulated, what it's made of, what its significance is in our lives, what we're made of underneath the appearance of what we've become, which makes it a hell of a lot easier to let go of the excess, to just let it dissolve away and to have a sense of calm and serenity in that process. And it's this that's going to allow us to have our head straight when we come back into the sign of Aries. So Jupiter is giving us the right inner alignment to deal with all of it. And what this will do is that whatever appearance comes forth after that, whatever we build, whatever we're trying to ignite, it will have a greater resonance to the depth of who we actually are. And we're not just corresponding to external demands and just going along with it. We've been doing a lot of that since 2023, or things that we've just been doing out of habits. Because think about, and I say this because think about the sign opposing Pisces. It's a sign of Virgo, which has to do with the practical daily application and routines of our lives that allows us to move from one task to another, to problem solve in a very practical way. So right now, what we're going through is dissolving those old patterns, those configuration. We're trying to figure out how to reconfigure that. That's what the eclipses are about. And I'll talk about the eclipses in an upcoming video. So now I'd like to pose some self-inventory questions to you guys. Ask yourself, what started in March 2023 that is still dragging on today? As well as what attempts you made since May of 2025, and think about why they failed and why is it that it's not going anywhere. And these questions require self-honesty, right? It's just you and yourself. It's okay. The point is to really understand where we're coming from, how we keep pushing, and what the outcome has been. Think about which routines and practices just feel dreadful right now. It's almost as if no matter how hard you try, you just can't fit it in. You can't get any satisfaction out of it. It's like going nowhere. Also think about what old habits and attachments you need to let go of. Things we need to let go of, because the fact that we keep holding on, it's bringing us to the brinks of, instead of being able to thrive, we're just constantly surviving now. So it's time to think about, what are these attachments? Where do I need to detach from? And another question is to think about what it is that you feel. The sign of Pisces is very feeling and intuitive. What still has potential in your life? What's worth keeping, but now reconfiguring it, redoing it in a different way to make it into a new form? But it's worth keeping the potential, but you just have to approach it from a different way. This is also a time to ask, how can I recalibrate my daily life? And this is one of the most important questions. And having a good understanding of this is what's going to let us get through that 2 years where Saturn is going to be in the sign of Aries. Because if you know how to recalibrate your daily life, if you can understand what new routines you need to set into place so that when you wake up in the morning, you can ignite, be in your routine and pattern and make it to the end of the day, you're not going to deal with so many false starts, which Saturn is very much about in the sign of Aries. And honestly, this is a time to find out what our inner truth is. We have made some crazy ass decisions since March of 2023. It's brought us to somewhere very different. And we're saying that we're banging our head against the wall now. So those things need to dissolve. They need to come to their conclusion. And it's always better to go willing than to have us dragged by our hair, paraphrasing Mark Twain. So in conclusion, we can say that Monday is marking a threshold, and it's the commencement for the eclipses to come through 6 days later, or the lunar eclipse. The solar eclipse will be at the end of September. In many respects, Saturn, as the planet of negativity, limitations, detachments, and time, is pulling us back from Aries and all the failed ignitions, things that we try to actualize. We're being dragged back into the sea of potentiality. We're being asked to undo what's been hardened into place since March 2023 and to dissolve what came through since May 24th of 2025. We're being asked to understand the essence of things and not just all the appearances that we've made. And we have to be very okay with letting certain things dissolve. And to be honest with you, I'm looking forward to this Saturn's ingress back into Pisces. I don't know about you guys, but for me, my experience since May of 2025 has been quite unpleasant. I don't mind letting certain things dissolve, figure new things out, and figure out how to proceed forward in a different way. So this is an opportunity. And for some of us, that chaotic nature of the eclipses and that very negative feeling of Saturn's going to come through if we are overly attached to certain facets of our life. With Ketu in the sign of Virgo, South Node, we're trying to let go of the old ways of problem solving, the way we would show up in our life every day through our routines and habits. We're trying to conjure up some new ways. So the less resistant that we have, the less chaotic we're going to feel with this eclipse. So this brings us to the end of our video. This was a bit shorter. And if you like the content of this video, please do remember to like, subscribe, and comment. You know I love your comments. And if you want your own personal chart read by me, you can go to the links below this video and all of that will be there. And as you sit with this transit, may Saturn help you to release what can no longer endure, and may Jupiter align you to the essence of what is meant to grow in the coming months. May we emerge like the phoenix from the ashes. That's it for today. Sending you much love. Till next time.